Good evening and welcome to The Edit. My name is Matilda Marozzi. I'm on the Melbourne Press Club board. I'm also a radio producer and journalist at the ABC. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're able to offer you a really unique opportunity to talk directly to employers to find out what they want from you, for you to be able to get a job in their newsroom. Remember, throughout the evening, you can put questions in the Q&A or the chat and I'll put them directly to our guests. Before I begin, I just want to remind you, as a reporter or producer, you'll be working to pass on stories to our communities. And that's something the Indigenous people have been doing on this land for generations. I'm currently joining you from the city of Maribyrnong, which was a significant meeting place for the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and the Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to start this evening by acknowledging their elders past, present and emerging, as well as other First Nations people who might be joining us tonight. Welcome. Something you may not know is that the Wurundjeri people take their name from the Woiwurrung language, word Warren, meaning the managum, and Juri, which is a grub that is found near the tree. Something I really love about my job is that you're constantly finding out new information like this and getting to share it with other people, and I hope that's something that's attracted you to journalism as well. If you haven't been to one of these events before, The Edit is the Melbourne Press Club's program for students, young and early career journalists, supported by the copyright agency Cultural Foundation. It's a space where you can learn new skills, ask difficult questions and meet your colleagues. Events this year have been online, but we hope to see you in person in the new year. It's a great opportunity for networking, meeting employers and learning new things. If you're a student journalist, I would like you to keep in mind that the Melbourne Press Club Student Journalist of the Year Awards are open at the moment until the 7th of January 2021. So we're keen for you to get your best work and submit that for us to judge. The prize is really excellent. It's supported by the Judith Neilson Institute for Journalism Ideas. And if you win, you are given a trip to the Investigative Reporters and Editors Conference in the United States. And you also get $1,000 in cash to help support you while you're over there. So highly recommend, if you've done a stellar story this year, submitting it for that award. You can go to the Melbourne Press Club website for more details, and I believe that we've got some information in the chat there as well. It's under the Edit tab on the website. But you're not here to hear from me this evening. You're here to hear from our guests, and it's my pleasure to welcome them. Matthew Brown is a senior producer at the ABC across Victoria and Tasmania. He started in regional Queensland and has done a lot of work covering sport. Kate McGrath is a multi-award-winning journalist and Chief of Staff at Channel 9. She's also on the Melbourne Press Club board. Thank you, Kate. And last but not least, Tyla Harrington is Macpherson Media Group news editor, and that includes papers like the Shepparton News and Riverine Herald in Echuca. She's won a quill and got her first job in journalism at the age of 18. Thank you so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
As I said, if you have any questions throughout the night, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll put them directly to Matt, Tyler and Kate. I'd like to start off by just asking you all how you got your first job. I might start with you, Kate. Can you tell me what was your first job in journalism?
Sure. Well, unlike most of our audience here tonight, I didn't study a journalism or a communications degree. I studied English literature and history at Monash, and I was in my final year doing honours in Renaissance history, and I realised pretty quickly that I didn't so much want to read history as write it and witness it. So I thought, okay, journalism's for me, and it always held a special place. I grew up loving journalism, always being surrounded by it. We always had the news on, we always had the papers. So I, through a friend, got in contact with the news director at Channel 10, Dermot O'Brien, and managed to wangle my way into 1 week's work experience. And I had a moment because I guess I didn't have an expectation of what a newsroom was like. I had one of those aha moments, if you like, where when I walked in, I just was immediately in love. So many sounds, like blaring TVs, multiple channels, all the radio stations going, the scanners, people screaming at each other, people with passion. And I just went, this is where I want to be. So I treated that week as an audition for my dream job. And look, it paid off. I basically never left. The week after, the intern who was supposed to be on the week after me, this is back in 1999, mind you, couldn't make it. So they said, I'm going to stay another week. I'm like, yeah. And that second week, I got experience in the news library, on the COS desk, answering phones, helping out with auto cue and being in the studio. And I just kept turning up and nobody complained. And then within a couple of months, I got a paid job. And, I jettisoned that. I started off in the library and doing auto cue. And then I pestered Dermot O'Brien for 18 months and made, until he finally put me on the road. And it was one of those, he said to me, you're going to sink or swim. And I must have swum because I'm still here. So I started a really junior level. I did a lot of gathering for other journos, and it took a long while to sort of put my voice and face to a story. And then, one day you wake up and you're a senior journo, and then I looked around and I thought chief of staff desk is where I'd like to be. And that was going pretty well. And then I got a tap on the shoulder back in 2011 to do the same job as chief of staff over at Channel 9. So I just
hustle.
A lot of grit and determination, basically.
Matt, what about you? How did you get your first job?
So I was studying journalism at the University of Southern Queensland in Toowoomba, and we had a close relationship with the ABC there. The two journalists there were took our tutorials and ran our practical sessions. And when a job came up, I jumped at it to write 4 sports stories a day. And for that, so 20 stories a week, and for that I was paid $100 a week back in 1997-6. And, from that went on to get a cadetship in the regional city of Mackay in Queensland. And then I moved to Cairns, and from Cairns I got my dream job, which was as a sports journalist in the Melbourne newsroom. And, stuck with that until the 2008 Beijing Olympics, and then got into the production side of things. I've worked with insiders. I was the network sports editor for a while. I was the day editor in the Melbourne newsroom for a while. And my current role is I've moved from the news division into the regional division, and I'll explain a bit about that later. But to work with our regional journalists across Victoria and Tasmania, getting their material into the major news bulletins. So, very much working behind the scenes these days, but my first jobs were in regional Queensland.
And Tyla, what about you? How did you get your first job? It was pretty young, from my understanding.
Yeah, thanks, Matilda. I've wanted to be a journalist since I was a very young girl in primary school, and when I was 17, I dropped my resume into my local newspaper at the time, and they said, come back when you have a license. So I came back with my license and said, I'm ready. And they said, there's no positions here, but there's one at our sister paper in Deniliquin. So I dropped my resume in there and happened to get an interview and got the job and stayed there for 3 years, the cadetship was. And once I completed that, I moved to the Riverine Herald newspaper in Echuca and stayed there for about 4 years and worked my way up, and eventually moved to the daily newspaper where I am now in Shepparton.
And I'm just wondering if you could explain for people, Tyla, what your newsroom is like, and if there are opportunities for people with little to no experience.
Yeah, there's absolutely opportunities for little to no experience. I think I'm an example of that because the company, McGrath Media Group, definitely took a chance on me at the time, and I wouldn't be the journalist I am today if I wasn't surrounded by, really, really strong mentors and good mentors. We take cadets on across the group, straight out of high school sometimes, particularly at the Shepparton News, though it is graduate journalists. We take, most of our newsroom is made up of graduate journos. At the moment, we're lucky to have a lot of seniors, which is great, but across the group, we have about 30 journalists, I would say, 3 photographers and a subbing team. So we're quite lucky to have so many staff on.
And how many newspapers does that cover?
That's 7 newspapers.
Yeah. And when you're looking for a candidate, what makes some people stand out more than others? That's
a good question. I think obviously spelling and general knowledge is a must in this industry. It always helps when people read a lot, and I'm not just talking about newspapers, but novels, poetry, anything you can get your hands on. A good writer, I think, is someone who reads a lot, and they develop their craft that way.
Yeah. Kate, I'll go to you. Can you give us an idea of what it's like at Channel 9, how many journalists you have, and what the newsroom looks like?
Sure. It's a pretty big newsroom. We have, it comes and goes, but up to 11 news reporters and 5 in sport. We have 15 camera crews. We've got about 10 producers. There are 3 rotating chiefs of staff, plus a number of assistants. And that doesn't take into account, the editors, graphics, like media exchange, news library, the people that put it all to air, the studio crew. So it is a big group of people who, put about 8 hours of news to air every single day. So it's a pretty full-on place, but it's really electric and full of people with real enthusiasm, and I've got to say that's a quality that everybody has. So if you don't have it, it's not for you, because journalism and news especially, it requires really long hours, becoming a mini expert on something completely different every day. So a spark of enthusiasm, a spark of joy, being a great team player, just all comes into play because, everyone's a cog in a big machine.
Yeah. And if you're just joining us, you're with the Edit event where finding out how you can get a job in journalism. I'm joined by Matt Brown from the ABC, Tyla Harrington from McPherson Media Group, and Kate McGrath with Channel 9. Kate, obviously the Channel 9 News Bulletin is a big bulletin. You see people who are pretty experienced, but is there room for people who are just out of university potentially to get some work at Channel 9?
Absolutely, and we are always looking for new people because it's, constantly evolving. People are moving on and trying new things. We're always looking for that entry-level person who we can really, bring along for the ride and, hopefully get on our screens one day. So I know this has been a tough year for internships, but when that all opens up again, that is really the level where we look to find people who could be a next candidate. So the person who's my assistant, the COS assist, is one of the jobs that we're always looking to fill because being a COS assist, requires learning across like a number of platforms, how to turn information, send it to social, send it to digital, make sure it gets to the right journo, gets to the right producer, even letting our affiliates know at 3AW and The Age and people like that as well. So someone who we're always looking for people who are really genuinely interested in news, somebody who understands what's going on and you can say a word to them and they'll know what that means. So that job is great. So many of our current journos started out as assistants. When you're looking at the quills, like Jade Vincent, who took away, Best TV Journalist, was one of my very first assistants back in the day at Channel 10. So it's a great place to get noticed and really learn the craft. Also the News Library, another great place to get an entry-level position. A lot of it when you're at the beginning level is data entry and gathering and things like that. But look, you've got to have a job to get a job. So, if you're offered anything, please take it. Another really key thing that wasn't around once upon a time but is so important, social and digital media, which is just a constant 24-hour thing for us at Channel 9. If you are confident in your abilities, can write quickly, can find out information well, and you're pretty tech savvy, that's fantastic. So there are so many entry-level positions, and everyone I've spoke, because I actually sort of did a bit of a straw poll asking everyone how they got into their job. Our news director, Hugh Nayland, tried to get internships at a number of newsrooms and was knocked back until he, said, he rang Channel 9, he said, I'll answer phones for free. And, now he's the news director. So, you don't start at the top. You just get your foot in the door.
Absolutely. Thanks for putting your questions in the Q&A. I will try and get to as many of them as I can. Matt, I might start out with a question for you. Someone has asked if you have any advice for people who suffer some anxiety.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great question. Look, anxiety is pretty rife in journalism. I don't know if rife is the right word, but it's certainly something that a lot of us deal with, and a lot of us have learnt to recognise in our peers, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, as mental health and the importance of it has become such an issue across all media. But advice for people that suffer anxiety. Look, journalism is a pretty tough gig, and it often involves covering some really difficult situations, and you really do find yourself in pretty deep at times. And so what has become important for us as journos has just been that awareness that occasionally you're not doing as well as you might have been, and being able to, and something the ABC I'm very thankful for has been very good at, being able to step back and take a look at how the job's affecting your health, and being able to put process in place to recognise, distance yourself if you need to, and seek help. I don't know if I'm answering your question very well.
I guess also anxiety is sometimes that comes with caring about what you're doing, whether that's a job interview or whether that's a story. And if anxiety means that you're going to double check that fact, or you're going to do extra preparation for the interview or for a story, potentially I guess that can be something you can use in your favour if you can harness it and direct it in the right way, because you do need a lot of energy and there's a lot of excitement and adrenaline in newsrooms, I've found when I've worked in them. So it's not necessarily a negative thing, I guess.
No, look, as long as you've got control of it. It's you're absolutely right on when big stories break in newsrooms. It's the best job in the world. It's you can be covering some horrendous situation, but the way newsrooms band together, and the way sometimes newsrooms like the ABC and Channel 9 may work together on a big story to make sure that we're covering it as well as we can for our audiences. And that's when it's exciting to be a journo. But I don't reckon there'd be many journos who wouldn't have had issues with anxiety, and a lot of them have learned to harness it and use it for good, like you said, Matilda. That's a really good point.
Can you explain for people what the ABC newsroom looks like, and regional and local where you are, the kind of staff and the kind of entry-level opportunities? Absolutely.
So the ABC is obviously a very big organisation nationally, not as big as it used to be, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, but the Melbourne newsroom, which is the one I've worked in for nearly 20 years, is probably a total of about 60 or 70 people. Now, when it comes to actually journalists rostered on each day, it's probably more like 10 to 15. All those other people are news producers, chiefs of staff, online producers, camera crews. There really is, as Kate mentioned, a really wide array of skills that we need to get the news to air every day. And in the regions, some of the bigger regions like Ballarat, their station has about 20 people, again, across a wide variety of jobs. But in the newsroom itself, there's 4 journalists, the same in Gippsland and Sale. But some of the smaller places, Shepparton has 2 journalists, Mildura has 2 journalists in their newsrooms, and Horsham has 1. So across the country, there's 48 different regional bureaus, and they're of various sizes. Wollongong and Newcastle are huge. Horsham is obviously much, much smaller. And there are jobs for journalists in the newsrooms. There's job for journalists as producers, as presenters in those regional newsrooms. So the ABC is a very big beast, as I mentioned, and the news division and the regional divisions are actually separate. So the journalists that work for regional, while their stories are carried by ABC News, they actually work under a different division. So there's a slight, well, it's not really a disconnect, but there is a slight difference between the two. But as far as entry-level positions go, certainly it's the regional stations where most of the opportunities are. The Melbourne newsroom takes cadetships. Unfortunately, the cadetship program for news has been suspended next year and won't resume until 2022. Again, because of COVID, we haven't been able to train our cadets this year as much as we'd like. But while that's a very formal entry process to get into the Melbourne newsroom, in regional stations, there are opportunities for casual work, opportunities for short-term contracts for journalists who are perhaps a little less experienced, either showing real promise straight out of a graduate a university program, or from other newspapers and regional commercial television. We're just looking for really good storytellers, basically, and if you can prove that to us, there'll be a position there for you. So certainly the junior opportunities tend to be through our regional stations, but if you spoke to most of the journalists in an ABC metropolitan newsroom, I would say 80 to 90% have spent time developing their skills in our regional bureaus. And internships, you also mentioned, there is an internship program. It's run through the university. So we have a relationship with 5 universities in Melbourne and others in our regional bureaus. So if you are keen on an internship at the ABC, go through your course coordinators at the university, get them to get in touch. There are limited numbers in the Metro newsroom. I think we take 3 from each of the 5 universities for 2 weeks at a time. And they are short and sharp, but you can make an impression in those 2 weeks. And again, plenty of people who have come through the internship program have gone on to get those short-term casual contracts that turn into full-time jobs.
Tyler, one question for you from Angus Thompson. He's asking, what do you think some of the advantages are and challenges of working in a regional newsroom, and how it might compare to the city? So I might give you all a chance to talk on this, but Tyler, you're looking after newspapers such as the Shepparton News and the Riverine Herald. What do you think some of the benefits of starting in the regions might be?
Yeah, I think the best thing about starting in a regional newspaper is you get to try everything. Like, I remember when I first started, when I was 18, I was taking the photos, I was doing the stories. I ended up laying out the page eventually, and then I was sending it to Shepparton as well. And then as I moved to Echuca, you're taking videos and eventually you're doing podcasts. You get to try everything. And the beauty of that is you find out what your strengths are and you can really capitalize on that. I can't talk about working in the city because I never have, but I think that's one of the biggest strengths of working in, at least making a start in regional newspapers.
Kate, what have you found about some of the benefits of maybe, the journos that you've had that have started in the regs?
Well, they're prepared for the workload that's going to come with working at 9 News. They're used to doing multiple stories across a day. They're used to travelling quite a bit as well, writing scripts in the car and on the run, getting the job done throughout the day. And look, the beauty of doing the jobs in the regions is you get to make those initial mistakes, etc., on a smaller scale, if you like, as well. There should be more people wanting to go to the bush. You get to cover everything. You get to know the community really well, and you understand how things like crime and courts and police, etc., all intertwine with each other as well. And that doesn't change when you get to a metro situation, but it's just easier to sort of facilitate as well. I would recommend going to the bush, and in any form. And I would stress too that, if your dream is to, do TV news or something like that, don't say no to a job at regional radio. Don't say no to a job at a regional newspaper, because, you just need that job. You need that portfolio to get together as well. And and then you get rid of that imposter syndrome that I think every junior reporter deals with as well. And I would say too, look, don't just sort of go for traditional media as well if you're trying to get a job. Just if you want to be a journalist, be a journalist. I'm available on Twitter. People that tweet me story ideas or, send me, pictures of something that's happening at the moment. I would just say look at the world around you and get in touch on that way too. If you think something's a story, let us know. And also too, you've got the ability to build up a portfolio if you don't get a job in the regions or something like that, through podcasting or, doing your own blog or newsletter or something like that. I mean, the 12-year-old Leonardo Puglisi is a journalist and he's doing it out of his garage in Hawthorne, and kudos to him, he breaks stories. So he's just decided he's a journalist and he's running with it. And that confidence is something that'll get you noticed. But I would definitely recommend going to the regions. There's so much to learn and getting to know communities too. Communities are the same wherever you go, but the scale, starting off smaller, will help you, I think, appreciate how everything works.
Thanks everyone who's tuned in. You're with The Edit, we're the Melbourne Press Club's program for young and early career journalists. I'm really thrilled to be joined by Kate McGrath from Channel 9. She's the Chief of Staff there and is involved in hiring people to work at Channel 9. Tyla Harrington is with McPherson Media Group, and Matt Brown is with the ABC. Matt, you mentioned there are a lot of the jobs, entry-level jobs are in the regions. And I think if you've studied journalism, you probably understand what a journalist is and what they do. But a job that I started out in but didn't really know what it was till I started working in it was producing. Can you explain a bit about what a producer does and why that might be a good way to start your job, your career in journalism?
So, I mean, producers have a lot of the same skill sets as journalists, as news journalists, sorry. So they're doing the same thing. They're finding stories, they're talking to people, they're identifying things that will interest their audience. And then the radio news journalist may go off and write short stories for the radio news. The producer will do longer form interviews and set up live material in conjunction with their presenter. And that's the way they get those stories out to their audience. And it's just such a great way to start. And totally agree with Tyler and Kate, what they say about working in regions and everything to do with getting to do everything. And the ABC is a bit the same these days. You do get to cover all those platforms. But the big thing for producers and for news journos is just learning to find a story. And that's something that you get to do in the regions just by talking to people and learning, hearing that thing that they may have just mentioned in passing that you can then develop and find a story. That's what it's all about. And when we're looking for people, when we do interviews, the primary thing we're trying to find out is whether you can identify a story and find the angle that your audience is going to be interested in. Whether you have any radio experience isn't all that important. That training can come. So whether you're from papers, commercial TV, regional commercial radio, if you can prove to us you can find and tell a story, then the training and the skills of how to do that across platforms will come. And that's where producing is, it's such a great way to learn to talk to people and identify news angles.
Yeah. I would highly recommend it. As a producer, you talk to, whereas a journalist, you might only be covering 1 or 2 stories a day. As a producer, you can be across anywhere from 10 to 14. And I have a great contact book because everyone I've ever called for any radio show I've done, I've just kept their name and their number and what they do. And I would have way more contacts because I've worked for the last 6 years as a producer than you would as a journalist, because as a journalist, you're just not covering the same volume of stories, or it's also you work closely with people who are more senior. And, I've had a lot of amazing mentors and they've helped me figure out how to identify news angles and, how to get talent across the line if they don't want to come on radio or come on camera. And that's a big part of your job, cold calling people and just convincing them that they should come on. So, any production jobs, it's a great way to start out. And any mistakes you made are kind of covered by whoever's presenting a bit as well. Kai and Millie, keep putting your questions in the Q&A. Kai and Millie have asked one about internships, saying with COVID-19 this year, it's been a bit tricky. There haven't been as many news internships offered. And what can you do if you're graduating this year and your uni won't extend their insurance, or if you're trying to get an internship yourself? What's the best way to go about trying to approach that? Tyla, is there a way that you get interns at your organisation?
Yeah, funny you mentioned that. We actually just hired one of our interns who was working from Melbourne remotely, which is an interesting experience, but it's becoming more common since COVID, I think. So she was doing 2 days a week for 6 weeks, and she was really impressive. So we gave her a job. So we are taking on interns. Obviously, we can't take on too many, but I would encourage people to make contact with their universities and get them to contact McGrath Media Group to see if there is anything going. I mean, we'll put on as many interns as we can, and we definitely be open to doing the remote internships because it's worked for us.
Kate, what about for you?
Yeah, admittedly, it's been rough, and we've missed having those people through. Look, the internships will start up again, obviously, next year at some point. But for those who have missed out, I would just, you don't have to go through the internship program to get a job. Call all your local papers or your local radio stations. See if they're at a radio station, for example, things like answering the phones in the middle of the night. Look, it's a hard slog, but that will get you noticed. There's and as I said, there's so many sort of social media and digital ways to build up your portfolio. If you're doing a journalism degree, you've probably got a great mate that you're sitting next to in class every day that you could start a podcast with, and that is getting published, and that will get you noticed too. I will say that someone with a long list of I answered phones here and I did a week's work experience here is going to play out so much better than someone with a master's of journalism that doesn't have, any experience or, shown that they've done any extracurricular stuff. I do appreciate that doing a degree and having a job and then doing more stuff on top of that would be a big workload. But if you want to work as a journo, you're going to have to work really long days and have a big workload and sort of be on 24 hours a day. So anything you can wangle, make those phone calls. My current Chief of Staff Assistant, Abby, just said that every week she would set aside 2 or 3 hours, a block of 2 or 3 hours every week to cold call organisations and see if she could participate in some way. And, she did got so much experience just through purely doing that. And, she's got a great career ahead of her because, she stumps up and she shows up, and that's basically what we're looking for. So you don't have to go the traditional paths. If you show a bit of chutzpah that you're trying to get out there yourself, that is impressive and we will notice.
Now, Matt, we've got a few questions here about what grabs your attention in a cover letter, what to do with a resume. But I just wonder, how many people do you actually hire when you've just looked at their resume and cover letter first up? Most of the jobs that I've heard about people getting, it's kind of through your network and who you know and what you've done. I've never personally got a job through just applying and being offered it.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different processes. I mean, the formal process at the ABC is an interview process, and it needs a formal application, and that involves your cover letter and your resume. And I've been involved on panels where we've had 120 applicants, and I've been involved in panels where we've only had a handful. So when you are up against 120, that tends to be those entry-level positions. And in those instances, your cover letter and your resume are pretty important. And what we need to see in those are examples of where you have found original stories. It's not necessarily important how wide of an audience that went to. What's important to us is how you found it, whether you And if you can, if you can demonstrate in the documents that you provide when you apply for a job at the ABC, if you can demonstrate that you have found stories and how you found them, they're the sort of things that we're looking for. But yeah, I mean, the ways into the ABC are through that formal process, through the cadetship, which I mentioned will resume in 2022. And the other ways are through casual work and short-term contracts. And if you can get those and put yourself before the people who do the hiring and impress them, that's when the opportunities come to move sideways. And the ABC being such a huge organisation, there are chances once you've got your foot in the door to move in any sort of direction. But to that's the challenge, and that's why you're all here tonight, to hear how do you get your foot in the door. And so if you're applying for jobs at Horsham or Mildura, some of our smaller bureaus, you do need to just take a bit of care with that cover letter. Really sell yourself. Don't go over the top. Tell us what work you've done, whether it's paid or unpaid, and give us examples of stories that you've done. Because if we read through the cover letter and your resume and we don't see any evidence of journalism, you're going to be on the no pile straight away.
Tyla, we've talked a lot about, getting yourself in front of people and cold calling. I wonder if you've got advice for what makes a good cold call. Like if someone's called you up at the Riverine Herald and said, hey, I'm keen to work, what works for you?
Don't call on deadline. Check my deadline and don't call then. No, but 6 o'clock for the riff. So not then. In the morning works best, so call then. And I guess it would pay to just introduce yourself and tell me why you want the job, when you're available. And sometimes I might not have time to hear you out, but send me an email or follow up the next day. Don't be afraid to touch base again if I don't get back to you, because I mean, in this gig we get a lot of emails and sometimes we don't respond to all of them. So send another email. I've got no problem with persistence. I think it's to be admired, actually.
It's also helpful when you're a journalist, if you're persistent and can do cold calls, you'll get better stories and more stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Kate, I might go to you with the same kind of question. It is really important that before someone calls that they've researched your organisation, know when your bulletin's on, know what you do, and don't call it a bad time. It sounds simple, but it's really important, isn't it?
It's so true. And, the number of times I get emails for the Channel 7 Chief of Staff would probably be about 10 times a week. So already, off the list kind of thing. But it's true. There are good and bad times to call. Don't call on the hour. We're listening to the news. Don't call during the rumour file. That's where we get a lot of our stories. But yes, persistence is key. Tenacity is key. I agree with Tyla. Do a couple of follow-ups or do a call, say, I always like it too when people introduce themselves properly on the phone. Hello, this is your name. I would like to speak to Kate McGrath, the Chief of Staff. Just that level of information is always good. A good phone manner helps enormously. And just if you could introduce yourself quickly and said, would you mind if I can send you an email, have that email ready to go, and then I'll just know it's there. And look, I've got folders for everything. So, and I have given jobs to, put them in people's frame. People have sent me their show reels sort of cold, and one person was Ollie Haig, who put together a show reel over a number of years, with friends and standing at scenes where, he would, report the story. He put a great show reel together. I said to my boss, this guy's got, huge potential. He's out there making it happen. He got a job in our regions, which is we have a regional newsroom element as well, whose details David's going to put up for everyone as well to contact. And now he's working in South Australia in the newsroom in Adelaide. So, be aware of the type of programs that we do. And also too, I will say that I can identify really quickly people that just want to be on TV. Then they're not the people I'm interested in. I'm interested in the storytellers. I'm interested in the truth seekers. We are just another form of journalism. If you would really like to just be on TV, there are plenty of other avenues for that. This is not glamorous. A lipstick and away we go, but trust me, you'll spend a lot of your time sitting in gutters eating nuggets and drinking McDonald's coffee because it's the only thing that's available, with a bladder of steel because you're waiting on the story to happen. Have I gone off topic completely? I've been up since 4 a.m.
I did a short stint in the ABC newsroom and was out on the road for a few days, and I was amazed how exhausting it is just not knowing where you're going to be, how long you're going to be out there, what story you're going to be doing. 1 minute you'd be chasing a story, a court story, and then something more important would happen and you'd be over to the other side of the city with your camera crew and trying to send copy from your phone back to the newsroom. I would second that. TV journalism, not as glamorous as you might think, but it is certainly fun and it is good to be able to tell a story with pictures. So if you think visually, you would be really great at that job. Matt, we've heard from Tyla and Kate about, calling a number of times, persistence, and someone on the chat has asked what advice you would give to people who feel like they're getting constantly rejected.
Yeah, that's tough. I guess the key is to know why, and you should always, feel free to follow up and ask for questions of why something hasn't quite gone your way. Whether that's because you've performed a short stint and, no more shifts are being made available, all the way down to whether you're just not getting callbacks for your inquiries. Just ask what you could do to fill the gaps, to give them what they need to make a success of it. And, provided somebody has the time, I've always found at the ABC that we're quite willing, having most of us come through the same process, to give that sort of feedback. And particularly after failed job interviews, one thing the ABC is pretty good at, again, is just we take notes on every interview we do because we have to write up reports. And a lot of the time that includes just little bits of advice and little gaps in resumes. And we're always happy to feed that back so that you can go and get those skills you need somewhere else and make yourself a bit more job ready. But, fully acknowledge that they're tough situations to be in when you feel like you're getting nowhere. It's just about knowing what you need to do to tick the boxes.
Tabani and another person in the chat have asked a question about diversity in the media. There's been a bit of reporting about a lack of diversity in the media throughout the year. I know the ABC was copying it a bit when they released their news lineup, and it was a whole heap of white faces. People of colour on the chat have said they do find it frustrating and wonder if, being of colour, how that might impact them looking for a job potentially. Kate, do you have any views on the diversity in your newsroom and if that's something Channel 9's looking to change?
Always. We want to represent the community at large as best as we can, and we do have a range of ethnicities and colour on our news program already, but not enough, I agree. I've actually just joined the Monash University Journalism Advisory Board because I want to change that. I'm finding that there are fewer graduates of colour. Like, I'm not finding the people, with the greatest diversity who are job ready coming to me. So I feel like it's at the enrolment level in the universities as well that we need to tackle it. So I've made suggestions that do we need to start looking for promising students at a high school level, especially Indigenous Australians and things like that, and fostering their potential and perhaps providing scholarships or something like that, because I'm finding at the university level, by the time they come to us, the diversity is not there. Or if you are a promising person doing a communications degree, you're often likely to get snapped up by a big corporation like BHP or something, which also is trying to ensure that it is representing the entire community as well, but can probably offer kinder conditions and better pay, etc. But it's something I'm concerned about. I'm always looking for, great talent. And as I said, I want to represent our community as a whole on our screens. And I've always fought for that. And I hope that, we won't be having this conversation in a couple of years and that it changes even more than it has. But certainly, I would have no issue with what anybody looks like. Don't think just because it's TV you have to look a certain way, although there is that perception. We are looking for everyone, and I would urge everyone, don't be worried about that. The person, the ethnicity that you are or the part of the community that you represent actually doesn't matter, because you're not the story. You're there to tell other people's stories, and that's what we're interested in, the way in which you tell other people's stories. So don't worry. We're not just looking for blonde girls, even though I used to be one. But I was never the story. It was always the other person that was. So I would encourage everyone, and if anyone of colour or wants to question me further on that, I am providing my email and Twitter details at the end of this as well, and you can contact me directly, and I'd be more than happy to have a chat.
Tyla, I know Shepparton's got a lot of diversity compared to other regional centres. Is there diversity in your newsroom, and is that something that you're conscious of when you're hiring?
I guess it's a bit the same as Kate. There's not enough, and we were just chatting about it the other day in the newsroom too. It would be so if there was more diversity in our newsroom, because it's not just to do with, you're covering a whole bunch of topics, and I am concerned, like Kate said too, that there's in our newsroom, and I wish there was more. I don't know whether it is at the entry level or whether there's a number of different issues, but like Kate said too, I'd be happy to chat to anyone, and I'd encourage people not to be afraid to apply, and I definitely would never discriminate because of...
You're having a little bit of trouble with your audio there, Tyla, so I'm not sure what's happening. But, Matt, it's in the ABC Charter that, we're trying to promote diversity, and I have seen it improve a lot since I've been working for the last 6 years. But like Kate said and like Tyla said, that we're always trying to do more, and I'm sure that's something that is front of mind for you when you're looking at applicants.
Yeah, really good point. And I reckon the last 5 or 6 years, that time frame is about where we've started being a bit more proactive. We were always looking for people through the application process who might help us improve the diversity of the faces and voices that we have on air. But we realised about 5 or 6 years ago that wasn't enough. And so we've been quite proactive since then. So the ABC does have cadetships available for Indigenous Australians, and we also have cadetships and placement positions for culturally diverse placement positions. So they're available, and they're all on the ABC employment website, which if you Google it, it's usually pretty easy to find and pretty easy to navigate. There's certainly a heap of jobs on there at the moment, maybe as many as half a dozen Indigenous and culturally diverse placements. So I'd encourage anyone to look at that, because like Tyla and Kate said, we're certainly conscious of the fact that we let our on-air voices drift away from a true representation of Australian society, and we're proactively trying to change that, and we're getting there, but we know we've got some way to go.
Everyone's talked a bit about, showing experience, showing that you've done journalism, that you've found stories. I just wonder if you could talk a bit about how best people can do that. Are there freelancing opportunities in your organisations, or community radio, or blogs? Like, what are you looking for? Tyla, what kind of experience would you like people to have if they're going to get themselves at the top of the queue for a job?
I would say to people that are trying to get a job to just write, and whether it's just, making notes in your phone about observations you make of a town, wherever it may be, just write as much as you can. And, that might not be published anywhere, but you're still writing and you're developing your craft as you go. And I personally love reading column pieces, like opinion pieces that journalists write. And it might be something about, building a shed or something really just mundane, but send it through. If you can write well, we'll be able to notice straight away. And, I think we'll always make space for talented people, whether you become a blogger that's just contributing pieces for free, or maybe you have a page, just a one column strip on one of our pages. Like, it's still getting published. If you're not getting paid, I wouldn't be concerned. If you're good enough, eventually you will be paid.
Kate, where would you recommend people start building their portfolio?
With the lack of internships, etc., I would recommend, as Tyla says, just writing. And I would recommend looking at a story in the paper or on radio or TV that you've seen, and then taking it to the next step. Often we're so frantic with the news of the day that as much as we'd like to, we can't often explore the next step of the story that's really important. If someone came to me after any incident, just say it was this horrible stabbing murder in Seaford overnight, and obtained interviews with that person's work colleagues, or found out further information about, the people who have been arrested, or could just take it to the next level, make phone calls to the police, make phone calls to whomever. Maybe they find CCTV of something that happens, because that is basically trawling the streets looking up for cameras, and that is very integral part of TV news. And if they could write a story showing me that they had investigated something to the next level, I would be so impressed that if I couldn't get you a job, I would send it to everyone I knew, saying this person is enthusiastic, they know what to do, and it's not hard. There's information around us all the time. I don't feel like as I said, just start being a journo now. Start looking around at the world around you. I mean, we get half our stories because journos drive past something and say, did you see that thing? And that, it's that basic. It's pure observation. So I would encourage people to do that, and use Twitter and use online forums to write, to publish, and you can link them up to a number of organisations. Don't worry, we read everything that are tweeted at us, the good and the bad.
Matt, what would you recommend in terms of what you're looking for in a portfolio?
Yeah, I'll totally agree with what Kate and Tyla said again, but I guess what I'd like to stress if you're trying to get a job at the ABC is there's no right path anymore. Where we used to look for people that already had ready-made broadcast skills, that's gone out the window. Now, again, and I've said it way too many times tonight, but we're looking for storytellers. And we filled a position in the Horsham newsroom recently, and the interview, I think we interviewed 5 people. One of them was a documentary maker. One of them was a commercial radio news reader. There was a couple from local papers. And the person who ended up getting the job, Alex Darling, worked for the local freebie newspaper in Horsham. And he had, through his work there, developed a reputation in town as being first on stories, of finding them and getting them, and was beating the local ABC journos out. And so that's how he got his name known. Now, when I started at the ABC, we weren't taking journos from local papers, but I would say now that's probably where we get most of our people. And we also get them from commercial TV news in the regions, for all the reasons that Kate pointed out earlier. They know how to work hard, they know how to work fast, they know how to script quickly and concisely. So, and now that our journalists at the ABC are working across online, radio news and TV news and everything in between, that's taken away the need for you to have those specific broadcast skills. That training comes later. So if there's a job there at the local freebie, grab it. Anywhere that you can write stuff and publish stuff, even if you're publishing it yourself, just proof that you can do the job.
Alex actually, he worked at volunteered at community radio when I was there. And the first day he started in Horsham, he sent me either a message on Facebook or an email to tell me about his new job. So shows that, now I know that he's there, and if I need a cross from Horsham, I'll be in touch with Alex to do that. I might get you all to talk about the best career advice you've ever received and how that's helped you in your jobs that you've had. Tyla, what was that for you? Coming from one of your mentors, I'm guessing, at McPherson Media Group.
Yes, coming from one of my mentors, it was never forget the little things. I think when you start to climb the ladder and you get your front page story or your page 3 or page 5, it's easy to forget about, doing like from the past or from the archives or locking the doors or, doing anything small. But as soon as you forget those little things, it's when you just become undone, I think. And by little things, I also mean like the spelling of a name, the spelling of a town, all different places. Everything has to be spot on. And no matter how big the story is, if you've got a front page story and it's all great, if you get that name wrong, all of a sudden it's a shocking story and you might as well not have written it, in my view. But yeah, so that would be my best piece of advice, is not to forget the little things.
Kate, what about you? What's the best advice you've received?
A couple of nuggets over the years. It's better to be right than be first, but please try and be first. To triple check everything. Make sure you've got 3 sources if you want to break some news. Make sure that you can get it signed off before you go with it and it's breaking. Everybody's a contact. So, the person that you're sitting next to in class today, they could be, next generation news director. So treat everyone with kindness and fairness, and always be a decent, truthful person. Even if that means, saying, I can't talk to you right now, I'm on the road, I've got this, story that I think I've got to myself. People do understand. And make news your hobby. If it's your hobby, if you're still reading 4 newspapers a day before 7 o'clock on your day off, then you're probably in the right job.
Matt, what's it been for you?
As a broadcast journalist, the best advice I got was that trying to be smart was dumb. Keep everything as simple as you can. Know your audience. If you try to use big words to show off that you know them, and you're ruling out parts of your audience who might be, making kids lunches or hanging out the washing while they're listening to you, simplify things down. Learn to tell the story in simple ways so that your audience, no matter who they are, is going to catch all of those details. So, and know your audience is crucial.
Yeah, it is critical, isn't it? So thank you everyone for watching. Good luck job hunting. I think Matt, Kate and Tyla have given you some great tips, and if you're interested in working at the ABC or Channel 9 or McPherson Media Group, they've got their Twitter details there, they've got their emails, they've said they want cold calls or emails at the right time. So please get in touch with them. Make sure you know what organisation they work for and how to spell their name correctly, because otherwise you'll be off the list. I want to say a special thank you to Tyla, Kate and Matthew for giving up some of their evening and their insights tonight. We'll be sending a small gift your way as thanks. Thanks also to the copyright agency Cultural Fund. They support the Edit events and they have for a long time now and enable us to bring you these forums. Next year, please sign up to our newsletter because we'll be having these forums back in person where you'll be able to network with your future colleagues or your future boss, and being able to not only hear from people like Kate and Matt and Tyla, but next year being able to come up and say hello to the people in the crowd is a great way to get your foot in the door. These events couldn't be happening without the hardworking staff at the Melbourne Press Club. I'd like to thank in particular David and Will, who have made sure that this Zoom event has gone off without a hitch tonight. They'll also be putting up some of the information on the website, including a YouTube recording of this session. So if you have friends that couldn't make it and they're looking for a job, please send it to them. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard and like what we do at the Melbourne Press Club, please think about supporting us financially. You can do that by signing up for a student membership, which will help you get to these events next year, or you can also donate. It's all at the Melbourne Press Club website, and I think Will or Dave will be putting some in the chat as well. This has been our final edit event for 2020. Please stay tuned for more edit events next year. If you have any suggestions of what you'd like to see, you can get in touch with me on Twitter or on email. I'd love to hear from you and really look forward to seeing you in person next year. Thanks so much for joining us.